Hi class, welcome back. This is week 3, activity 3.2, which is all about leadership models in nature. In lesson 3.1, you explored why creative leaders should learn from nature, and I hope you're getting the sense of why sustainable design fits into a bigger system that will be greatly enabled, perhaps even requires entirely different outlooks, organizational structures, and approaches to leadership than we're finding in the business and design communities today. So in lesson 3.2, we're going to dive into just a few of the wide range of leadership models you can find in nature. Along the way, I want you to be thinking about how each leadership model works, how it fits into the organizational structure of that organism and the ecosystem in which it lives, and when and how it might apply to human systems, and of course particularly to sustainable design teams and projects. As you explored last week, our kind of cultural assumptions and even our language about leadership is associated often with military or perhaps even sports analogies. Our language is also full of references to nature, although sometimes the assumptions and the implications of those references are incorrect or, at a minimum, incomplete. For example, we've all heard or used the expressions pecking order, dog eat dog, or leader of the pack. This sort of language implies, and many of us grew up learning about nature, that nature is dominated by a top-down leadership style based on competition, constant competition, constantly striving to increase ranking in the group at the expense of others and fighting for the lead position. That's kind of the classic leadership model we assume in nature, and just like this wolf pack here, and that's often the leadership style that we assume happens in business. But, of course, fighting is expensive and generates losers as well as winners. So evolution has gotten rid of species that spend a lot of time fighting because successful species just cannot afford to waste limited energy and resources constantly looking for a fight unless there's a really important goal there. So as you'll explore in the videos in this lesson, hierarchies are common among some species, but even then, leadership and organizational structures in hierarchical communities are much more complex, adaptable, and nuanced than simply fighting for dominance. And there are often multiple leadership and organizational structures within a given community, like this wolf pack here, or what you'll see in the videos ahead is referring to lions. So let's take a look at some alternative views and models of leadership that can be found in nature. You know how we think of ourselves as having 5 senses, touch, taste, smell, hearing, etc.? Well, some of you know there's an expanding school of thought on that. Some people suggest that we have many more senses, things like sense of direction, sense of gravity, sense of humor. So we can really open up our minds and think of alternative forms of senses. Similarly, when we tend to think of leaders, we think of those that direct, control, organize, or perhaps manage a group of followers. That's kind of the classic understanding of leadership that you explored last week. But let's consider other sorts of leaders. In the last lesson, in that presentation, Why Learn from Nature, you saw several images of other kinds of leaders in nature, although at the time they weren't presented as such. Here, if you recall, this was you might recall this picture. It's a group of lichen, different kinds of lichen, growing in a seemingly inhospitable place, on a vertical rock in a very cold place. You see snow there. But this lichen represents the leader of an entire ecosystem, a leader that creates something out of nothing, creating conditions that allow other life to follow. Now, lichen can do this through a complete synergy of fungi and algae, together making it possible to live where other organisms can't, and leading the way for an entirely new ecosystem to form. As sustainable designers, sometimes you have to work between a metaphorical rock and a hard place, and conditions that are not yet hospitable to sustainable design. You'll have to create something out of nothing, and then create conditions for other sustainable designers to follow. Reflect on what the lichen can teach you about how to be creative leaders, how to lead sustainable design where it does not yet exist. Like the lichen, seeds can also be considered leaders, leading the life of the new plant, perhaps leading the establishment of its species or even plant life in general in a new location. The seed will stay dormant for as long as necessary and is equipped with, quote, sensors that signal it to sprout only when and where conditions are hospitable. And from that seed emerge the first sprouts, the first shoots and roots, which are the leaders of that particular plant. So how is a seed able to do this? Well, it uses a combination of strategies. For example, carrying resources within itself so as to be self-sufficient until the roots and shoots can establish in order to start bringing in water and nutrients and generating energy from photosynthesis. It also has a protective shell of some sort that often doubles as its transportation system that only relents or is forced open when conditions are right for germination. As sustainable designers, you have embedded in your beautiful designing minds the seeds of how things could be, how things should be. Your ideas about sustainable design need to sprout and take root when and where conditions are right, but sometimes where no similar ideas exist. What can you learn about being a creative leader from seeds and sprouts and new roots? When you go out for a walk and you go out in nature, you often see many of one group of thing in nature progressing in a certain direction. For example, like this shelf fungus climbing up this tree trunk. At any given time, only one of them, or one group of them, is out in front, is the leader, is the growth front. Perhaps building upon, leveraging, launching from the one before. Or perhaps one is way out front and the rest fill in from behind. As sustainable designers, you may find yourself, whether you like it or not, the leader within a growing trend. What can you learn about how to be a creative leader pushing sustainable design at the front of growth, as in the growth front in nature? How you become leaders matters also. In the previous presentation, we used this image to suggest that even if you're well equipped to beat the competition, cooperation and collaboration is usually the better way to go, if you remember that. That's because in nature, fighting your way to the top is not really the norm, because fighting, as we said, is very expensive. More often, you'll see cohabitation, cooperation, collaboration, co-creation, and synergies. Now, many environmentalists are constantly fighting the system. They might be fighting the good fight, and that has its place. And as sustainable designers, you may be wise to equip yourself to fight for what you think is right. However, nature suggests that we keep fighting to a minimum and seek collaboration and positive outcomes instead. Within a school of fish like this one, there is no leader at all. In this organizational structure, the group is full of feedback loops, which allow each individual and the group as a whole to be agile and responsive, again, without any leader at all telling anyone what to do. Each fish is highly aware of those around them, or some subset of those around them, constantly sending, receiving, and responding appropriately to the information that's shared. This leaderless structure works well when everyone has the same very clear goals and follows a few simple rules, things like if this, then that. As you will see in the upcoming videos, swarms and flocks are other leaderless organizational structures in nature. Yet some of these groups work so well together as to be called superorganisms, meaning the collective intelligence of the swarm or hive functions like a single intelligent organism. When you watch these videos, consider the situations you live or work in and reflect on where, when, and how a swarm model of leadership, meaning no leader at all, might be the optimal situation. We saw this one again in last presentation. And we tend to think of leaders as the ones on top, out front, very visible. But whereas the lichen lead the way for others to follow, for other life to follow, the decomposers in an ecosystem, like these mushrooms living in the hole of a dead tree, lead that crucial transformation from death to life. As sustainable designers, you are leading the transition from the old, dying, or dead ways of doing things. What can you learn from decomposers about how to lead those transitions? We've all seen geese or other birds flying in the V formation. Clearly there's a leader, the goose out front. And as you might imagine, and if you're a cyclist, you know this too, the geese take turns being leader, in part because the one up front is doing more work. They're creating a nice draft for the ones behind there, and the leader's going to need a rest, okay? But it's also been discovered that no one goose knows the entire journey when they're doing those big, hundreds or thousands of miles of migrational routes. It's also been discovered that only a subset of the flock actually take turns being the leader. Some geese are never the leader. The idea is that at any given time, the one goose with the needed knowledge and strength is leader, and no one goose has all the needed knowledge or skills needed to lead the entire journey. This leadership model, which is something of a hybrid between hierarchy and a swarm, is called a heterarchy. As a sustainable designer, you recognize that projects go through many stages: conceptualization, ideation, design, and implementation, and there's marketing, and no one person has sufficient breadth and depth of skills to optimally lead the whole process. Yet among your team, you're likely to have individuals that are ideal to lead each part, and some people are never equipped to lead the process. Can you reflect on when this sort of leadership model might be appropriate for the projects or teams that you're working on and with? The lesson ahead is filled with videos from nature that I hope you very much enjoy. It was tremendously enjoyable for me to search them out. While you watch, I want you to reflect on the type of leadership models you see, how they fit within the organizational structure of that group, and when that type of leadership model might work well within human systems, particularly the sustainable design teams and projects that you're familiar with. Okay, enjoy your next hour of nature videos, and we will see you in the next lesson.